Hi guys, this is Hero. How's everyone doing today? So today I have a very special video, which is Mercury transiting its own sign of Virgo, its primary Mutikon sign, and that also is a sign that Mercury gets exalted in. Okay, so very important video. Also, this is even more important. Why? Because Mercury, when it goes into Virgo, after a little while, it goes retrograde in the sign. And then it goes back forward. So whenever a planet like goes retrograde in general in its own sign or exaltation sign, or even opposite sign, like whenever it goes in exaltation in some sign of importance, whether it's in a good or a bad way, it's pretty powerful. Okay, and Mercury, its most powerful spot is in Virgo because it's its own primary sign and exaltation sign. It's the only planet that gets exalted in its own sign. Okay. So pretty powerful stuff here. And also, if you look at the degree lengths, Mercury, it basically moves forward in this sign. Then, up until it goes retrograde, a planet moves a little bit slower, okay? And when it moves a little bit slower, I covered this in my stationary video, a planet gains more awareness, okay? So it's moving slower, gaining awareness in its own sign and exaltation sign. Then, right at 15 degrees, which is just happens to be coincidentally, and I don't believe in coincidences that much, but coincidentally, I guess you can say, it starts going retrograde at about 15 degrees Virgo, okay, which is its own. It's the highest degree of exaltation in the sign of Virgo for Mercury, okay, so pretty powerful stuff. And then it goes backwards. So when it was going forward, it was moving slow, gaining the awareness. Then now moving backwards, right when it reached its peak exaltation point. And when it reached its peak exaltation point, it was moving the slowest speed. So it's having the most awareness at the peak exaltation point, which is super strong stuff here. And then it's going backwards now. It's kind of, after it gained the awareness, it's kind of doing the things karmically it needs to do. And then also just another coincidence, I guess you can say, the retrograde ends right at about 0 degrees Virgo. Okay, so it basically went forward slowly, gained the awareness it had to right up until its peak exaltation point, then going backwards, doing karmically whatever it has to do, and then right at the beginning of the sign again, it starts going forward again and then moves through, right? But for the sake of this video, you could tell there's a lot going on here, and they're all really important journeys, okay, especially for Mercury here. But for the sake of this video, I'm only covering the first journey that I just described here, okay? So this is from Mercury moving forward in the sign of Virgo up until it goes retrograde at about 15 degrees Virgo, okay? Because then it's another journey, but I kind of just described everything at a gist right now, okay? But like I said, this is only the video up until 15 degrees Virgo, or up until it goes retrograde. And the dates for this transit, Mercury enters Virgo on about August 20th of 2022 for this year, and it goes retrograde at about September 9th, 2022 for those of us who live in the West. During hemisphere, okay? So just wanted to point that out. But all three, like I said, all three of these pieces of Mercury going through this sign, the first slowing down, then the retrograde, and then the speeding back up going through the whole sign, they're all important, and I'm making a video on each individual leg of that journey to comprise of 3 separate videos, I guess you can say, okay? So now, Mercury, like I said, is going through Virgo, slowing down up until its peak exaltation point, okay? Now, one thing you got to remember also, just before I do this, is that Jupiter is sitting in Pisces, okay? Now, why is this important? Yeah, Mercury and Virgo both aspect each other, but they aspect each other in their own signs, okay? Whenever 2 planets either aspect each other in their own signs, which very few can do, only Mercury and Jupiter can do, and Venus and Mars can do, and Saturn can do with either Sun and Moon. Okay, so there's not a lot of combinations for this. Okay, whenever this happens, it's very, very, very powerful. Okay, and actually, to an extent, even 2 planets aspecting each other in exaltations are also strong, like Mercury and Venus, or like Jupiter and Mars do. Okay, but it's a little bit different. And actually, if you want to take it a little bit even more step further, when 2 planets are both in debility aspecting each other, or both in opposite signs aspecting each other, also again, powerful stuff, but the approach for those is a little bit different in how they're conducted, and maybe I'll discuss this in a separate video later. Okay, but for right now, just to get going in this video, Jupiter and Mars are both in their own signs aspecting each other. Okay, and Jupiter and planets across from each other, like Jupiter signs are always across from Mercury signs, right? This is not a coincidence. Okay, there's a reason why this occurs. Same with Mars and Venus. If you notice, Jupiter and Mercury in Vedic astrology terms go by what? Jupiter goes by Guru and Mercury goes by Buddha. Okay, these are both terms, not even just in the East, but in the West, representing very, very high intelligence, okay, or like smartness. So these two planets are in their own signs. They both represent different things, but they both have to do with just overall intelligence or smartness or wisdom, you can say, right? So they're both in their own signs because they're like opposites but the same, right? So because they own opposite signs, but they're also the same, like they have the same root energy to an extent, okay? But they represent different sides of that wisdom or that root energy, right? So Mercury and Jupiter, they're both in their own signs and aspect each other, okay? This is pretty strong, okay? Because this is like the rational intelligence and the consciousness, I guess you can say, both influence each other, which is huge, okay? So now tying that Jupiter there in Pisces, aspecting Mercury and vice versa, because they both kind of feed off of each other, okay, constantly throughout the whole transit. Now let's take Mercury, okay, who's moving real slow up until exaltation point in Virgo, okay? So what does Mercury represent? Mercury represents a bunch of things, but at a general sense, it represents rational intelligence, communication, and it also represents basically deciphering your wants versus needs, okay? Which is kind of what Virgo represents. So when Mercury's in Virgo, it basically says, okay, your rational intelligence is focusing on your wants versus your needs, like to an extreme, okay? And like I said, it's slowing down. So you're going to be very aware. Look at what house Virgo is in your chart, okay? I know a lot of people don't like it, the fact that I don't discuss certain, like when it comes to these transits, I don't do enough specifics with how it could be in people's charts. So I'm going to say it right now. So look where Virgo is in your chart, okay? Most likely you will feel your thought process being a lot more clear or level-headed when it comes to like wants versus needs, wherever Virgo is in your chart. Okay, now, so let's just say Virgo is in your 4th house. So when it comes to home or any comforts in general, you're gonna kind of notice what are your wants for this thing and what are your needs versus this thing. Okay, either the home you're looking at, or if you're trying to buy a home, this all details you got to look at for yourself. Okay, and hopefully you've learned a little bit by watching my videos. But I just wanted to state that as an example. Now, I said this Mercury for this transit, it goes retrograde at 15 degrees. Okay, now why is this important? If your ascendant degrees is a little bit high, like 15 degrees or past, this Mercury in your Bava chart is going to be transiting not actually fully your 4th house yet, but it's going to be transiting your 3rd. It's going to be transiting the 4th house of your Lagna chart, but only the 3rd house of your Bava chart. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If you don't know what a Bava chart is, you gotta just look it up for yourself. But it's basically calculating certain placements more accurately based off of your ascendant degrees. Okay, but what do you do about this? So let's just say Virgo's in your 4th house, right? But your ascendant degrees is real high, like 15 degrees or past. Mercury most likely is going to be transiting through your 3rd house in the Bava chart, okay? So you're not only going to get this as much in the 4th house, but you're going to be getting some 3rd house effects from this placement, right? So let's just say I said home, right? You're going to be a little bit more aware with your home. Maybe it might be more, tie in some 3rd house implications into this 4th house, right? So more, I guess you can say, specifically when it comes to efforts in the home or with your siblings in the home, because 3rd house represents siblings and efforts, okay? Or efforts with siblings in the home. You got to see this kind of stuff, right? It all depends on how far up your ascendant degrees is and stuff like this. And if your ascendant degrees is somewhere between 0 and 15, just notice that up until your ascendant degrees, you're going to be getting some third house effects, but after it passes the ascendant degrees, you'll get more primarily fourth house effects. Okay. And the reason this is because the house is like, contrary to what you might have heard, it's not just like, oh, a certain degrees for this sign, it's third house, and then immediately 1 degree late, like right away it starts fourth house, and then right away it starts fifth house. No, it's like there's a certain transition or a certain flow that throughout the whole house system, I guess you can say. And this is just kind of ways we've segmented it, okay, into like 12 houses and stuff, which is important. But just understand that it's not so black and white segmented, that there's a flow in between and a lot of gray areas in between the house degrees where things might overlap. It's kind of like when a dasha starts, right? It's not like right on that day, like if you go from Rahu to Jupiter, Mahadasha, for example, it's not right the day your Jupiter starts, Rahu's over and Jupiter starts. Like it does start, but like there's a little bit of a flow or a transition. It's the same thing here. I'll give you one other example, okay? Mercury, let's just say Virgo's in your 11th house, right? So when Mercury transits through Virgo, you're going to be very, very aware, because it's kind of slowing down, getting ready to go retrograde, in regards to like gains, your friends in the society, like neighbors, things like this, right? When it comes to 11th house, okay? Your like your wants versus needs when it comes to this, which is pretty powerful. But if your ascendant degrees is real high, or I guess you could say up until Mercury passes your ascendant degrees, just to make it simple for the sake of this short general video, you'll get a little bit more 10th house effects, right? So it won't be pure 11th house things. It'll be, it'll be a lot more like, maybe people at work, because 10th house represents career, right? Or maybe like not just any blind friends and family, but, more colleagues or friends and family who might be like in the same field as you, or like things like this, right? It's a little bit complicated to explain, but just like in a few seconds right here. But I think you guys get the point of what I'm trying to say. I'm basically saying up until Mercury passes your ascendant degrees for this transit, in whatever house your Virgo's in, keep in mind that it could give some effects of the house before, but most likely it's going to be a blend of the house it's in and the house before, just because Mercury transits the earlier degrees of this sign, okay? So hope that made sense. So for this transit, it's going to be really, really aware. Your rational intelligence is huge, okay? We use it all the time. We've been trained to use it all the time in today's modern world. So it's huge. So you really, really want to take focus on this. And this is really why I mentioned the whole house thing in this video, because I really want you to be aware and pinpoint in your chart where this could be happening, okay? And obviously you got to take into account natal placements and things like this. Like if Saturn's in Virgo, it's going to adjust things a little bit, okay? But I'm just speaking in general. Hopefully, like I said, you have a little bit of wisdom from my videos and stuff like this, that you can learn, okay, if Saturn's there, most likely it's going to add this effect on top of that, or it's getting Mars' fourth aspect. Let's just say your Mars is in Gemini, and Gemini happens to be Mercury's other sign, but that's a good example. Mercury's in Mars is in Gemini, so it's in Mercury's own sign, other sign, and it's aspecting Virgo. How would this affect this? Okay, hopefully you guys can pick up on this, but I really wanted to make that ascendant degrees thing clear, because I know that's going to be a case for a larger majority of the people. Okay, now let's tie in the whole Jupiter thing, right? So Jupiter is in Pisces and it's already retrograde. Okay, so what's the story here? I'm always talking about the story, right? So Jupiter is it's a consciousness. It owns spiritual learning, detachment, all this stuff. So it's that consciousness, and it's in the sign of detachment. So it's detaching, and now it's already retrograde for like a good month before this transit about. So it's already kind of had some steam pick up. So Jupiter, the consciousness is being forced to be aware of things it needs to detach from, okay, which is great, because wants versus needs, it requires detaching, okay? This is why Virgo is opposite of Pisces, okay? So your Jupiter is already kind of having that consciousness of, yeah, you know what? We should be detached from this, okay? Now, Mercury is in Virgo, right? So it's kind of being very, very aware of your wants versus needs. And because at a spiritual level, your awareness level, you're becoming a little bit more detached from certain things, you can really think a lot more clearly, even more clearly than a regular Mercury slowing down in Virgo, about what you really need and what you really don't need in general, but specifically when it comes to wherever Virgo is in your chart. And like I said, possibly whatever house is right before Virgo, especially if your ascendant degrees is real high, okay? So I hope that made sense. Couple other quick things I just wanted to touch on real quick. Just Rahu and Mars both happen to aspect Sagittarius. Rahu with its 9th and Mars with its 8th from Aries and Taurus respectively. So this is kind of affecting the Jupiter, which is slightly indirectly affecting the Mercury, but I'll just cover it a little bit here. So those two things, and I already covered this more in my Jupiter retrograde video, so you can watch this if you want a little bit more detail. But basically, they're both, I guess you can say, hammering the sign of Sagittarius, okay, to some extent. Mars is in its own opposite sign, throwing an 8th aspect, intuitive aspect on Sagittarius, but it's in its opposite sign. And Rahu, being Rahu, is throwing a 9th aspect on the Sagittarius, okay? So Jupiter Sagittarius is a little bit harmed. So the consciousness, I guess you can say, it's able to detach, and it is detaching because it's retrograde. But as far as your consciousness learning things, like I said, it's a little bit hammered because of those two aspects. So it's even more important to utilize this Mercury transit because the consciousness is a little bit hammered as far as learning goes. Okay, it's able to detach. It's really strong there in retrograde. But as far as the Sagittarius energies goes, it's a little bit hammered. And Jupiter is so benefic that it's able to deal with them a little bit, especially because, especially just because of the nature and the placements of both Rahu and Mars in this certain situation. But Jupiter's a little bit under duress when it comes to learning along the way as it's detaching. So it's really important to use this Mercury. Like I said, Mercury and Jupiter, they're somewhat opposites, but they're also the same, right? It's like, it's almost like a reflection of yourself in the mirror, okay? I hope that made sense. I'm not going to really try to explain that right now. But Mercury's kind of helping Jupiter out. It's saying, hey, look, I know you're detaching and you're under duress as far as learning along the way. I'm kind of going to decipher the wants versus needs to kind of, so that we can both help each other out. Because you're helping me out, you're still helping me out even though you're under duress, and I'm obviously helping you out as well. That's kind of the story here. And this is going on, that flavor is going on throughout the whole thing. Like when Mercury slows down, it goes retrograde and then it speeds back up. But for specifically when it's starting to slow down, like I said, it's just gaining the awareness, right? So deciphering the wants versus needs of rational intelligence. So it's basically, your rational intelligence is basically saying, hey, look, I think I really know calculatively what I want to do and what I need to do, okay? So I would encourage you all to go on this step and, take it seriously, whatever Mercury is telling you during these dates. About what you want and what you don't need, especially when it comes to wherever Virgo is in your chart, whatever house it is in the Lagna chart, and as well as possibly the house before if your ascendant degrees are real high. And if you don't, Mercury's gonna make you learn when it goes retrograde. I'm just giving you a little trailer right now, okay? Especially because Jupiter is under that duress and they both aspect each other retrograde. When Mercury's retrograde, Jupiter also is retrograde too. It'll make you really decipher your wants versus needs, okay? It'll make you really figure it out. But I'm hoping you guys take this, and it's only gonna karmically do it a little bit, right? And it's always best in general when a planet is about to slow down, when it's becoming more aware, you use your self-will, especially because Mercury is a natural Upachya planet, right? Because it owns the signs of 3 and 6. So it's always best when this planet is slowing down, to really use your free will to really figure out your wants and needs for yourself. Okay, so do the work, figure it out, because Mercury is a Upachya planet. It likes self-efforts, but if it's kind of forcing you to figure it out while it goes retrograde or karmically making it happen, it can be very, very rough. This is why Mercury retrogrades are a lot more rough, okay? Because it's like an Upachya planet, 3 and 6. It's designed for you to use your self-will in regards to the energies of this planet. Now, if it makes you learn it the hard way, it'll make you learn it the hard way when Mercury goes retrograde, okay, which I'll cover later. But up until then, especially because you have Jupiter's help And because Mercury's in its own exaltation and own sign, you really want to take advantage and with this awareness, figure out your wants and needs wherever Virgo is in your chart. Okay, so before it goes retrograde, and it kind of forces you to figure it out involuntarily to an extent, and only some things. It's only gonna make you figure it out in regards to some things. But if your awareness is real high and you kind of do the mental and spiritual work, you can become aware with a lot of stuff, not just whatever like karmically you need to figure out, if that makes sense. So you can figure it out like with a lot of stuff. Like I said, if you put in the work, this is a great time to put in the work. This is why I make these transit videos, okay? This is an excellent time to become aware about your rational intelligence, kind of getting on board with your wants versus needs, because your rational intelligence is important too. It's not just Jupiter that's so important as when it comes to wisdom, okay? Your rational intelligence is a huge part of it, okay? For example, if Venus is transiting Virgo, its debilitation sign, you'll notice it affects your Jupiter. Okay, Mercury and Jupiter, even though Jupiter gets all the love, the Mercury always is going to affect Jupiter, and it's a big part of helping Jupiter out, and just a big part of everything in general when it comes to this astrology system. Okay, so like I said, take it seriously. Use this awareness to really help yourself out. Okay, because this kind of thing is not coming that often again, where it's literally slowing down up until its peak exaltation sign, going retrograde through the sign again, but not leaving the sign, and then going forward. With Jupiter across in its own sign also, okay? So really, I'm strongly, I didn't really talk about much except this, I specifically stuck to these one or two planets. I really want you guys to take notice, do the mental and spiritual work to figure out your wants versus needs so that you guys can help yourselves out, okay? And elevate yourselves mentally and spiritually, in all aspects, because you'll carry this wisdom forward with you forever, okay? And if not, Mercury will make you karmically learn with some stuff, not everything, but when it's involuntarily, it's only involuntarily doing the things that are within your karma, but it will involuntarily happen when Mercury goes retrograde. So no worries if you can't figure out everything now, okay? So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know. And until next time, talk to you guys later. Thank you very much for watching.